countries in the region and in Europe. If you then combine the issues that you've been discussing with Atika over the JCPOA, you see that what they're doing is threatening a double whammy. And the other thing about the Iranians is that they're also signaling that they can take a lot more pain than the economies in the West. They can take it because they're authoritarian, and they can take it because they have a kind of tradition of doing that. Remember, a million people were killed in the Iran-Iraq war. It's not that long ago. So they are sending out these signals that they're robust. They've also got the capacity, using swarms of small, fast boats of the sort that we saw rescuing people from those stricken tankers a few days ago, to even bypass the American military might. If you've got hundreds of these boats all coming at literally at a rate of knots towards battleships, some would get through. So they are signaling that they've got some power, and therefore it's necessary to talk to them. Ultimately, they want to be able to dial down on the sanctions that the US have imposed unilaterally, much to the irritation and despair of the American allies in Europe.
Finally, I want to bring in, if I can, Fred Plotkin very quickly. Fred, you heard what Sam was saying. They're threatening a double whammy. Slightly risky, is it not, for Iran at this stage?
Well, I think that the Iranians at this point in time believe that they're in a position where they're essentially calling the Trump administration's bluff. The Iranians have been saying for quite a while they believe that there are people in the Trump administration, like, for instance, the National Security Advisor John Bolton and, for instance, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who are driving the administration towards a war with Iran. But they fundamentally still believe that President Trump himself, while he wants to keep this sanctions pressure upright, does not want a war with Iran. And it's something that the Iranians themselves have said as well. They don't want this to escalate into any sort of war. But at the same time, and Sam is absolutely right in saying that, they say that they are ready for one if it does happen. Not just because of the military power that they have, but first and foremost because of all the militias that they control in the greater Middle East. Issa, one of the things that a senior former Revolutionary Guard commander told me not too long ago, he said, look, the Americans need to understand, if this comes to a shooting war, it's not just the armies against one another. They say that next to every military base that the U.S. has in the Middle East, there is an Iranian militia that, or a pro-Iranian militia that can be mobilized very quickly. So the Iranians clearly saying they do have a lot of power in this as well. And today, even, interestingly, the chief of Iran's general staff came out and said, look, if we wanted to close the Strait of Hormuz, that's certainly something we could do. We could do it openly if we wanted to. But the Iranians at this point are saying they don't want this to escalate. They certainly don't want to close the Strait of Hormuz. They say they want to keep it open because they themselves say they feel responsible, and they are responsible, for the security of the shipping that goes through there, at least in parts of the Strait of Hormuz. And of course,